They burned the maps that showed it. They struck the names from the county rolls, and for over 100 years the people of Stone County, Arkansas, swore that Bitter Sorrow Hollow never existed at all. But somebody remembered the Raveners. Somebody remembered the smoke that rose from that hollow long before the first settlers were ever supposed to have arrived. And somebody remembered why every family for 40 miles taught their children the same rule above all others: never go up the Ravener Road after dark. Today, the record they tried so hard to erase finally comes back. And before we go further, I need to pause for a second, because what I'm about to tell you gets significantly darker. And I realized a while ago that some of this cannot be fully explained in a video format. The complete reconstruction of the Ravener census that was struck from the record, the family names the county erased, the exact coordinates of Bitter Sorrow Hollow they scrubbed from the survey maps, and the council's own written order to burn the ledger, dated and signed by the men who carried it out, I put it all into a written document. It's linked below, and the QR code is on your screen. Now, let's continue. To understand the Raveners, you first have to understand the hollow itself. Bitter Sorrow Hollow sits in the deep folds of the Ozark Plateau, in a stretch of Arkansas backcountry that surveyors in the 1880s marked with only 3 words: unfit for entry. Not unclaimed, not empty, unfit for entry. And that phrase should bother you, because those same surveyors mapped swamps, sinkholes, and rattlesnake dens without a moment of hesitation. But when they reached the mouth of that hollow, they stopped. They wrote those 3 words, and they turned back. And it was not the first time the land had been avoided. Long before any surveyor ever set foot in that valley, the Osage who hunted the surrounding ridges are said to have refused to camp within sight of the hollow. Their word for the place, according to the few trappers who ever wrote it down, did not translate cleanly into English. The closest anyone could manage was the mouth that remembers. They would track game right up to the ridgeline and then stop, turn their horses, and ride the long way around. Whatever the Raveners were, they arrived to a hollow that had already been quietly taught to everyone else as a place you did not go. The official story says the Raveners were poor settlers who drifted in from Tennessee sometime after the Civil War, illiterate, dangerous. Best left alone. That is the version you will find if you go looking in what few records remain, but that story does not explain the stonework. Deep in the hollow, half swallowed by moss and root, there are foundations, cut stone, fitted together without any mortar, the seams so tight that a knife blade will not pass between them. This is the kind of masonry that takes engineers and machines, not backwoods farmers, and it was already ancient when the Raveners supposedly arrived. The few locals who wandered too far up that creek came back talking about walls that curved like the inside of a shell, and a well so deep that a dropped stone never seemed to land. One old timber cruiser, a man paid to walk these hills and count trees, mapped what he could of those foundations back in 1897. He was no dreamer. He measured things for a living. And what he sketched was not the ruin of a cabin or a barn. It was a shape with points. 8 of them, radiating out from a central hub like the spokes of a wheel, the outer walls angled the way a fort is angled, built to have no blind corner and no soft side. He noted tunnels leading down from the hub, cut through solid bedrock, sloping into a dark he refused to enter. And in the margin of his own map, in a hand that grew shakier as it went, he wrote a single line: "This was not built to keep people out. It was built to keep something in." By the 1890s, the Raveners had a reputation that stretched clear across 3 counties. They did not come down off the mountain often, and when they did, the general store in Mountain View would go dead silent. Coins were left on the counter without a single word spoken. Nobody looked a Ravener in the eye, because everybody's grandmother had told them the very same thing. The Raveners could tell exactly what you were thinking, and they did not forgive. And yet the town could not quite cut them off, because the Raveners traded. Twice a year they came down with goods no dirt-poor mountain family had any business owning. Salt so pure it looked like crushed glass. Iron tools that never rusted, not in 30 years of hard mountain weather. And small ingots of a grey metal that no assayer in the state could ever name, heavier than lead, cold to the touch, even on the hottest August afternoon. The store owner took them anyway, melted the ingots into whatever he could, and asked no questions. Because the one time a man did ask, the one time he leaned across the counter and said, "Just where does all this come from?" the Ravener set down the metal, walked out, and the man's barn burned to its foundation that very night with no lightning in the sky. There was old Absalom Ravener, the patriarch, who was said to have buried 4 wives and outlived every one of his own children but one. There was Verna, his daughter, who folks swore had not aged a single day in 30 years. And there were the sons, nameless in almost every telling, who worked the hollow only at night and were never once seen sleeping. The family kept to a schedule that nobody down in the valley ever understood. On certain nights the whole hollow would glow with a low amber light, and a sound would roll down the valley that the old-timers described as a hymn being sung backward. Farmers miles away would bring their animals inside and bar their doors until dawn, and in the morning the light was always gone, and the raveners went about their business as though nothing at all had happened. There was one man who tried to see it for himself. His name was Elias Ford, a hunter from the next valley over, stubborn and proud and sure that all of it was nothing more than mountain superstition dressed up to scare children. On one of those amber nights in the fall of 1896, he told his wife he was going up to prove there was nothing there. He kissed his boy on the head and he walked into the tree line toward the hollow. He was never seen whole again. 3 weeks later, a trapper found his rifle standing upright in the middle of the creek, driven into the stream bed like a fence post, the barrel bent into a curve that no fire and no vise could have made. Of Elias Ford himself there was nothing, and his widow swore until the day she died that on quiet nights, from the ridge above her cabin, she could still hear a voice she knew, singing along with that backward hymn. Before we move on to what the surveyors found in the winter of 1908, stop for a second. What you just heard about those nights, and that backward hymn, is the part that changes everything. But it only makes sense when you see it written out next to the surveyor's own field notes, the struck family names, the scrubbed coordinates. It's all in the document linked below. Take 5 seconds right now, grab it, and then come back. Because what comes next builds directly on it. The link is in the description. The QR code is on your screen. In the spring of 1901, a circuit preacher named Josiah Hale rode up into the hollow uninvited. He meant to save the raveners' souls. He became the last outsider to see the inside of that place and live to describe it. What he wrote in his journal, before he stopped writing entirely, is where this story turns from mountain folklore into something the county would spend decades trying to bury. Hale described a great hall built of that same fitted stone, lit without any flame he could find anywhere in the room. He described the family gathered not around an altar, but around a machine. That was his exact word. A machine of brass and glass, humming softly, with the amber light pouring out of its very heart. He wrote that the walls of that hall were covered in writing, not English, not any alphabet he had ever seen in all his years with books. Rows of small angular marks that seemed to shift when he was not looking straight at them, running floor to ceiling, wrapping the curved stone in a language that made his eyes ache and his stomach turn. And he wrote that the machine at the center was not new, and it was not being built, it was being maintained. The brass was worn smooth in the places where generations of hands had touched it. Whatever it was, it had been running in that hollow for a very, very long time. And he described Absalom Ravener telling him, calmly and without pride, that the family were not the owners of the hollow, they were only its keepers. That something had been left in their care long before Arkansas was Arkansas, long before America was America, before the maps, before the surveys, before the country had a name at all. That the light had to be kept burning, and the door had to be kept shut, and that every Ravener child was born already knowing which was which. Their entire bloodline existed for one single purpose, to keep it fed and to keep it shut. Hale fled that same night. Within a week he was found lying on the Mountain View Road, his hair gone completely white, unable to speak above a broken whisper. He lived another 40 years, and he never once went near those hills again. That was the moment the county turned on the raveners for good. And it was not the strange lights or the backward hymns. Men can live near strange things for years without ever raising a hand. It was Hale. A grown preacher walked into that hollow hole, and he came back out hollow himself. And suddenly every family that had lost a child to those woods, every hunter who had vanished up that creek and never come home, had a name to finally hang their grief on: the Raveners. They became the most hated family in the entire Ozarks. Not feared, hated, And there is a difference between those two things. Fear keeps its distance and stays quiet. Hate organizes. And in the deep winter of 1908, the men of 3 counties finally organized. Here is where the record gets strange, and where the official history stops making any sense at all, because there is no account of a raid, no newspaper report, no trial, no graves. In an era when the smallest mountain feud would fill the county papers for weeks on end, the sudden end of the most hated family in the whole region left behind not one single printed word. What survives in its place is silence, and the exact shape of that silence tells the entire story. The 1910 census, taken just 2 years later, lists no Raveners anywhere in Stone County. It lists no Bitter Sorrow Hollow at all. The survey maps, redrawn in 1912, show only a blank where the hollow should be, an unmarked fold of ground that the cartographers simply left white, as though the land itself had been quietly deleted from existence. And the county road that once ran all the way up to the Ravener place now ends at a tree line, the last quarter mile unpaved, unnamed, and missing from every single map printed after 1912. And it goes deeper than the maps. The 1900 census for Stone County survives in the National Archive to this day, all of it. Page after page of neat clerk's handwriting, every family accounted for. Except that one page is missing, not damaged, not faded, cut. The binding still holds the torn stub where a single sheet was removed by hand, and the page numbers on either side of the gap do not add up. The one page that would have listed the residents of Bitter Sorrow Hollow was taken out of the permanent federal record sometime after it was bound by someone with the access to reach it and the reason to want it gone. Somebody did not just destroy a family that winter. Somebody erased the coordinates, and that is the part that should truly keep you up at night. Because erasing a family takes a mob, but erasing a place from every map, every ledger, and every census in an age long before computers takes an institution. It takes real authority. It takes men in offices, far from any mountain, quietly deciding that Bitter Sorrow Hollow, and whatever the Raveners had been keeping down in that hall, must never be found by anyone again. And people still go looking. Every few years, someone with a drone and a theory drives up that dead-end road, past the very last mailbox, and hikes straight into the blank spot on the map. Most of them find nothing but briar and rock and wasted daylight. But a few of them find the old foundations, the curved walls, and the well without any bottom, sitting exactly where the oldest stories always said they would be. And once in a great while, one of them comes back down the mountain talking about a low amber light, deep in the trees, on the kind of night when the whole hollow seems to quietly hum. In 2019, a group of amateur researchers finally managed to fly a drone over the blank spot on the map, the one the cartographers left white a century ago. For about 90 seconds, the footage is clear. You can see the ridgelines, the creek, the treetops, and then, right as the drone crosses over where the foundations should be, the video breaks. Not static, not a lost signal. The frame fills with the same low amber wash. The compass readout begins spinning, and the aircraft simply drops out of the sky. They never recovered it, and the one still image they salvaged, taken half a second before the feed died, shows a shape in a clearing that no one in that group has ever been willing to fully describe on camera. The county still does not officially recognize the place to this day. Walk into the courthouse and ask, and you will be told there is no Bitter Sorrow Hollow, there never was any Ravener family, and you really should not go wandering around on private land. But the old-timers up in those hills know better. They will not say the name out loud, and they still teach their grandchildren the one single rule that outlived the family, the maps, and the records all combined. Never go up the Ravener Road after dark. The Raveners were struck from the census, from the maps, and from the memory of an entire state, almost. If you want to know what they were really keeping down in that hollow, and why an institution spent decades making certain that you would never find it, the full reconstruction is waiting for you in the document linked below. And if this is the kind of buried history that the official record was built to hide from you, subscribe right now. Next, I am opening the file on a settlement deep in the Smoky Mountains that vanished the exact same way, in the exact same year. You are going to want to see what those two places have in common. and it was never once a coincidence.